Alrighty, G.A.S, and welcome back to video 2 of the online G.A.S Genius system to fuel a life on your terms. So in video 1, we looked into the G for your genius. And how do you initiate your genius? How do you get your genius out? And how your genius is the guiding spirit from within. And in today's session, we're going to be looking into the A for the awareness. Because as we found out in video 1, your focus creates your reality. That was the first secret of magic. And in today's video, we're going to be looking into the A for awareness. And why this is so important is because, as we mentioned in video 1, that your tension seeks resolution. And more often than not, and by default in actual fact, we're operating from our identity, from our safety, our security, and our survival. And this is all an unconscious process. And because we're operating from that space, no matter what we do, we're just going to keep being caught up in our known world. We're never going to break those shackles. We're never going to break that glass ceiling. We're never going to create the true success that we're truly yearning in an unknown future. So I want to bring in the second secret of magic, which is that your thoughts and your feelings aren't real. Now, wait a second. What did I just say there? Your thoughts and your feelings aren't real. You heard me right. So, if your genius is internally driven and our identity is being driven by external factors that are driving us internally, where is the power? Is the power inside of us still, or is the power outside of us? Now, what most of us do is we blame everything that's going on around us. The politics, the social dynamics, our upbringing, our principle, our government, the economy, you name it, we blame it. All right? But the problem is then the power's outside of yourself. So I want to pose one question. In every single time that there's an economic catastrophe, every time there's a recession, isn't there some people, a lot of people, but a small majority of those people that actually create major wealth through that time, that creates amazing results through that time? Didn't Nelson Mandela create one of the most amazing things and become one of the most, if not the biggest leader of our time, in spite of external circumstances, in spite of things going on outside of himself? Muhammad Ali even said, I knew I was the greatest. Sorry, apologies. He said, he said, I believed I was the greatest before I knew I was the greatest. So in other words, he focused primarily on being the greatest before he even believed or knew that he was the greatest. So what is that saying? That's saying that it all starts internally. That means that the results that we seek in our life are driven internally and not externally. So back to the second secret of magic here. We're looking into your thoughts and your feelings aren't real. You see, most of us go through this process. So what happens is there's an external event. That external event, something happens outside of us. Somebody steps on our toes, somebody pisses us off, somebody takes something away from us, somebody does something to misplace our trust in them, somebody tells us that we're not good enough. I don't know, you name it. Something externally happens. Even the economy, our politics, our government, or I don't know, whatever it is. Something externally happens to us, and ultimately what happens is that triggers us. So because that's triggered us, what that creates is a lot of psychological tension. So we've looked into tension and our identity. And the way your identity speaks to you is through your psychological tension. In other words, it speaks to you through your thoughts and your feelings, your internal dialogue and your internal feelings. So an external trigger happens, something externally happens and it triggers us internally. That sparks off our psychological tension. We react to that psychological tension, or we respond to that psychological tension. And because we do that, that changes our internal dialogue, that changes our internal feelings, and in doing so, it shifts the vibration that we're operating at. It changes our frequency. And from that space, it dictates and it changes our external behavior, and therefore we create a self-fulfilling prophecy. So think about it. The last time you tried to create something and you sabotaged yourself, what happened there? You went out to create this thing, a new job, a new business, a new relationship, whatever it was. You started going, something externally happened, it triggered you off, it creates a lot of psychological tension, and that psychological tension changed your thoughts and your feelings, and you did everything in your power to get away from that sense of being uncomfortable, and then you behaved in favor of that, and then you created a self-fulfilling prophecy, and at the end of it you said, you see, I told you so. You can't trust anybody. You see, I told you so. It's not my time. You see, I told you so. It just wasn't meant for me. So we tell ourselves all this story, but the reason that we're doing this is to resolve that psychological tension, is to move away from that psychological tension. So if something externally is triggering us internally, in other words, if something externally is triggering our thoughts and our feelings, tell me, are your thoughts and feelings real? Or is it just a mechanism of the tension that you're in? Because we're in that tension, and because we're in our identity, and remember, the job of your identity was to ensure your safety, your security, and survival. When we're in that psychological tension, unconsciously we're doing everything in our power to get away from what's ever creating that psychological tension. Now that is the job of your identity, is to ensure your safety, security, and survival, is to keep you in your known world. And the way that it keeps you in your known world is by us resolving that tension, by us buying into that story. In a time of exponential growth, in a time where the only constant is change, in a time that everything is changing exponentially, can operating in your known world and only operating in your known world and playing in a game of safety, security, and survival and listening to our identity and resolving our psychological tension, is this something that could actually support us in our highest good? Is this something that could actually serve us in creating a future that we desire, in creating a destiny that we desire, in pioneering our future? No, it can't. Because all it's ever going to do is keep us in our same known world. So a nice illustration of how this played out in business, in a business sense, is if you think about Kodak. Kodak, at the time, if we go back about 10 years, when digital cameras just came out, when digital cameras were the craze, when digital cameras were the next best thing, were the biggest thing, Kodak was a multi-billion-dollar business in this time. And they put all their attention and all their focus and all their awareness into innovating and making the best digital cameras. So, in other words, they were playing it safe. They wanted to become the best innovators and the best creators of digital cameras. But you see, there was a little thing happening in life, and it's still happening, called technology. Disrupting the status quo. Disrupting everything the way that we knew it. And digital cameras were slowly but surely being taken over by the thing called a cell phone. And the camera on a cell phone. And they didn't have the awareness to see what was going on here. They played their safety, security, and survival. And because they were playing the game of safety, security, and survival and innovating and just getting better at what they were doing currently, they actually got overtaken by technology. They got disrupted. And they almost went insolvent. Plain and simply because they didn't have the awareness to observe what was going on around them. But then you look on the other side of the coin, where there was a company called Garmin. Now, Garmin had awareness. Garmin were not playing in safety, security, and survival. What Garmin were doing is they were innovating. And what do we all know Garmin's for? We all know Garmin's for the G.A.S. system that you place in your car to get you from point A to point B. But you see, they had the awareness to observe what was going on around them and not be triggered by what was going on around them, but to be genius with what was going on around them. What did they do? They went and disrupted an entirely new market. They went and created something that was genius. They disrupted the fitness industry. Because what do we all know Garmin for today? For watches, like a Fitbit. They got the watch where you got your time, it measures your heart rate, it tracks your run that you did, or tracks your cycle that you did, so that you can come home and see how far you cycled or you ran, and what your heart rate was, and you can get your track, and etc., etc., etc. You see, they disrupted. They weren't disrupted themselves. They went to disrupt the market. So they had an awareness of what was going on around them. Now, the same thing holds true for us. You see, we need to have an awareness of what's going on around us at all times, so that we are not being triggered externally, that we can hold our power internally, so that we can make powerful decisions to move closer towards the end results that we're looking for, rather than away from them, by resolving our psychological tension. Remember, the first secret of magic was that your focus creates your reality. The second secret of magic is that your thoughts and your feelings aren't real. So if you don't have an awareness of what your thoughts and feelings are telling you and why they are telling you those things, could you actually work with it? If you didn't know how to operate your cell phone, could you operate your cell phone to your best of your ability? No. The same thing holds true with us. You see, our thoughts and feelings are generated internally. Our thoughts and feelings come from, plain and simply, a past experience. So things that have happened in our past, we do everything in our power to avoid those same things happening again. So every time you step into something new, automatically your identity, your ego kicks in and says, I know how this works. But how could it know how this works? Because how could it know how this works if you've never done it before? What it's thinking it's doing is helping you. That's the objective of your ego, is to help you. But the problem is that we don't understand what it's saying to us. We don't understand why it's saying it to us. So we have a past experience, something happens to us, and because that something happens to us, it gets stored in our unconscious mind, and because it gets stored in our unconscious mind, it sits there and it tells us every time anything externally happens and it triggers off that past experience, your focus goes to that past experience, and therefore you recreate that past experience. So think about that for a moment. Your thoughts and your feelings are based on a past experience. They come from a past experience. Because if you haven't experienced something, how could you think about it? How could you know what it feels like if you've never experienced it? And if we bring it into the present moment, and we bring it into the space where we're trying to create something, our thoughts and feelings, what we're doing is bringing our past experience into the present moment, and therefore we're going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy. We're going to create our fate based on a past experience. And this is like sinking sand, like quicksand. We get stuck into it, and once we are stuck in it, it is crucial that we get out of it, or else we die. Your end result will die. But if we don't know how the quicksand works, and we don't know that in quicksand we need to stay still, because the more I move, the more I jiggle, the more it's going to suck me in, so I need to stay still. Then I can get myself out. The same thing holds true with us. If we don't know how identity works and what it's doing to suck us into it and sabotage the results that we're after, how could we work with it? See, there's 4 major components of your identity. And that is, number 1 being your beliefs. Now, when I'm talking about your beliefs, what I'm talking about here It's not your beliefs in religious or any of those kind of form. I'm talking about your beliefs about yourself. For example, I'm not good enough. I'm not in control. I can't trust anybody. I'm not worthy. I'm powerless. I need to be perfect. You see, these are all beliefs that we hold true about ourselves. And we assume that we need to have these beliefs fulfilled before we can have what we truly want. But once again, that's only operating and running from a past experience. And if that's running from a past experience and we're doing everything in our power to resolve that past experience, then by default, we're going to keep recreating that past experience. So we've got 12 beliefs that we use in our training. And that's the 3-hour talk. We will go through these and you will learn a lot more around these 12 beliefs. The second part of your identity is your assumptions. So first being your beliefs, the second part is your assumptions. What do you assume to be true? What do you assume it takes to be successful? What do you assume about anything and everything? So for example, an assumption is it takes hard work to create success. It takes hard work to make lots of money. So my question is, how come you're not a millionaire already? How come you're not as successful as you truly desire already, if it takes hard work to do that? You see, that's an assumption, and that assumption is based on a past experience. And that past experience comes from your early childhood. You were born into a world through your parents, your culture, your society, your government, your country. This created a mold, your educational system, and all these things, and there's a lot of other factors. All these factors came together to create a mold and a construct of your awareness, of your identity. And we keep bringing that past experience into our present moment, and we keep creating from that space. So we've got beliefs that are created from those constructs. We've got assumptions that were created from those constructs. And the third one is your definitions. How do you define yourself? How do you define things? So for example, you could have a definition on education as being something bad. Like my brother. You see, my brother was brought up, and when my brother was growing up, he was dyslexic. And because he was dyslexic in those days, they didn't understand what dyslexia was. So because they didn't understand that, he had a terrible experience at school because his teachers used to tell him he was stupid and he was an idiot and he needs to get out of school, because they never understood what was actually going on with him. So my brother's definition on education and learning is bad. So therefore, he'll never put himself in a circumstance, in this area of where he has to learn in a classroom environment around other people because of those bad past experiences. How else do you define things? How else do you define yourself? Do you define yourself as stupid, as an idiot, as you can't remember things, as a slow learner? I don't know. How do you define yourself? And lastly, it's your dysfunctional formation. Your dysfunctional formation is 13 to 23 steps you take every single time without a doubt whenever you're creating something. There is a structure in your consciousness that without a doubt, every single time you step up and you create something, you go through those 13 to 23 steps and you sabotage yourself. Every single time, exactly the same way. Now, how crucial would it be to know that? Okay? So bringing it back, secret number 1, your focus creates your reality. And if your focus creates your reality, what are you focused on? What are you focused on? Because by default, us as human beings, we are focused on external environments, external triggers that trigger us internally, and therefore, because we focused on that external environment that's triggering us internally, all of our focus goes onto that safety, security, survival to stay away from that past experience, to ensure that past experience doesn't happen again. Therefore, we recreate that past experience because we focused on that past experience, and this is being held unconsciously. So this is probably one of the most crucial steps that you can understand, is to understand yourself. Because about alchemy is about controlling your perception. Because you see, your perception will create your reality. And your reality will create your perception. And there's a fine line in between. And as an alchemist, your job is to learn to drive and take control and master that fine line. Your perception comes from your beliefs, your assumptions, and your definitions, and your dysfunctional formation. It comes from a past experience. It comes from the construct of your upbringing. And what we do is we play out that construct of that upbringing. We continuously play it out, and we continuously keep recreating the same results. You see, because structure has integrity. And that is the S of the G.A.S genius system. Is something structure will dictate its results. Because something structure has an integrity. And you see, we all have structures within us, within our consciousness, from our past experiences. And if we don't know what these structures are, we can never change it. In the same way that could you honestly change and fix your car's radiator if you never knew your car's radiator was broken? No, you can't. Because it's going to create a lot of frustration and self-sabotage, because you're never going to find the core of what's actually going on. You're going to change the brakes, you're going to change the filters, you're going to change the oil, you're going to change the fuel, you're going to change the tires, you're going to change everything else, but you're never going to get to the core of the problem, and therefore you're never going to change the core of the problem. So in video 3, we're going to be discussing how your structures dictate your results, and how can you start taking controls of those structures to take control of your life. So once again, the G in the G.A.S genius system is your genius. And the first secret of magic there is that your focus creates your reality. The A in the G.A.S genius system is your awareness. And how important it is to have an awareness in this volatile, exponential world that we live in. Because if we are being triggered by external circumstances, we're going to focus on those internal thoughts and feelings. And because we focus on, we're going to keep recreating our past experiences. And number 3, we're going to look into our structures. And how can we start taking control of these structures in our life to take control of our life, to take control of our perceptions. So thanks for listening to video 2 of the G.A.S genius system. And I'm absolutely looking forward to video 3, where we'll be looking into your structures. And I'm really looking forward to, if you have signed up already, the Ignite Your Genius free 3-hour talk, where we're going to go even deeper into all of this until you can take control of your life. So looking forward to the next session. Ciao, Genius.